Anthropic finally released Mythos. This is the model that Anthropic said was too dangerous to release publicly. And guess what? They released it publicly. And I'm one of just a few people who has had early access to this model. And I'm going to tell you something before I even get into the video. The model is something else. It is absolutely a new class of artificial intelligence. And if you enjoy seeing me break down the latest model releases, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And this video is brought to you by Here.now. More on them later. Introducing Claude Fable 5. This is Fable, the new family of models. So remember, you have Haiku, Sonnet, Opus, now we have Fable. That is the brand new generation of model trained in the class of Mythos model. So a Mythos class model that we've made safe for general use. Its capabilities exceed those of any model we've ever made generally available. Let's look at the benchmarks. Everybody wants to know about the benchmarks. That's what we're going to be talking about first. Okay, so here we go. We have Claude Mythos 5 and Fable 5, and they've basically grouped them into one category. Remember, the only difference between Mythos and Fable is that Fable has guardrails, Mythos has those guardrails removed. Mythos is given to the security community to help harden software, to help find bugs, and Fable, on the other hand, is kind of with guardrails, won't do those types of things, but it's good for everything else. So when we talk about benchmarks, I know benchmarks can be misleading in a lot of ways. I know we look at benchmarks and it seems like every model release just increase the benchmark, increase the number goes up no matter what. But even when we use it, the vibes of the model don't reflect what we're seeing in the benchmark. And that's definitely the case, maybe with the exception of DeepSuite, which is a benchmark that came out a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I do not see that benchmark here. So we're just going to have to go on kind of the more traditional benchmarks. Agentic coding, SweetBench Pro, 80% as compared to Opus 4.8 at 69%. GPT 5.5 at 58%. Now, here's the interesting thing. Everybody that I talk to says GPT 5.5 is more capable than Opus 4.8. However, on SweetBench Pro, we're seeing a 10-point differential. And we're also seeing another 10-point differential between Claude Opus 4.8 and Mythos. Agentic coding, Frontier Code Diamond, 29.3%. Look at this, Opus 4.8, half of that. GPT 5.5, 5.7. It doesn't feel like these benchmarks are accurate to what I was feeling using the actual models between Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5. GDP val, this is a benchmark created by OpenAI. GPT 5.5, 1769 versus 1890 with Opus 4.8, now 1932. GDP val tests real world knowledge work. For spatial reasoning, GPT 5.5 did really well. Claude Opus underperformed, but now we have a new frontier model, 38.6 with Fable. Tool use got a nice few percentage point bump here. Computer use, 85% as compared to 78 and 83. To be honest, GPT 5.5 feels like, within the context of the Codex app, the best computer use model, the best browser use model that I've used. Legal agent benchmark, 2% versus 10% versus now 13%. Humanities last exam, the most scarily named benchmark on the planet. We now have two new frontier models, two new first place models with a slight decrease with tools from the preview to what we're seeing today. Here's Terminal Bench, a very, very important benchmark if you're doing any type of agentic coding. We have 83.4 versus 88%. Okay, very, very good. All right, let's look at the blog post. Of course, take everything they say in the blog post with a grain of salt. Obviously, they're going to talk it up. Obviously, they're going to say it's the best model in the world. I can tell you from firsthand experience, it is a phenomenal model. It is more different than any other model that I've ever tested. A lot of the times it's better. Sometimes it's just weird and has these quirks to it. It feels very different. It feels like a new training run. And remember, this is a 10 trillion parameter model, the first one of its kind. All right, Fable 5's capabilities exceed those of any model we've ever made generally available. It is state-of-the-art on nearly all tested benchmarks of AI capability. Now, I cannot wait till it gets tested on DeepSuite, showing exceptional performance in software engineering, knowledge work, vision, scientific research, and many other areas. The longer and more complex the task, the larger Fable 5's lead over our other models. Now, I want to pause here. This is what I saw most of all. No matter what task I gave it, it felt like I was kicking off a massive exploration. Fable wanted to look at my entire code base, consider every single possible angle of every line of code that I ever wrote. Maybe it even checked projects that I haven't touched in years. It really just felt like I was kicking off this entire exploration. It's such a weird feeling because you give it a small task and it no longer felt small once you hit enter. And it was very capable. Now, when I did give it tasks that I thought were extremely complex, that would require long time horizons to complete, it was like no problem. It didn't hiccup. It was like, okay, I got it. And in fact, even the most complex tasks that I gave it, it was almost like insulted by how simple it was. That's really what it felt like. And this video is brought to you by Here.now. They helped me publish all of the tests I was doing during the live stream. Check it out. Here.now is one of my favorite products to tell you about because one, it is awesome and I actually use it. And two, it has actually inspired the way that I think about the future of the internet. So if you haven't heard about it before, Here.now is the easiest way to give publishing ability to your agent. Whether you use Claude Code or Codex or OpenClaw or Hermes, all you have to do is tell your agent to go to Here.now and install the skill. Or you just come to this page right here, click the copy setup button, paste it into your agent, and it just knows how to do it. Then at that point, your agent can publish anything to the web on your behalf. And they also recently launched private storage. So you don't need to always just publish everything publicly. You can have your agent store pretty much anything on Here.now. And then even more recently, they launched custom URLs. So rather than only having a Here.now URL, you can use your custom domain with Here.now and publish directly to it. And the best part, it's completely free right now. So go check it out. I'm gonna link all of it down below, but it's Here.now. It's super easy. So now back to the video. So to release the model both safely and quickly, we've tuned these safeguards conservatively. They'll sometimes catch harmless requests, though they trigger on average in less than 5% of sessions. Now, during my testing, I did not experience this once. I did get a heads up that the model might have many more false positives than what I was used to. I didn't have that once. Now, I wasn't really explicitly telling it to look over the security of my application, try to come up with ways to improve it, but I didn't experience that once. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk about the pricing. If you are surprised by the pricing, don't be. I actually thought it was going to be more expensive. So Fable 5 and Mythos 5 are being offered at $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens. This is incredibly expensive. But here's the thing, you don't actually need Fable for the vast majority of use cases. If you've been watching the channel, you know we've been talking about model routing a lot. You know we've been talking about efficiency, the kind of multi-model world that we're almost definitely going to be experiencing in the coming years. This is a perfect example. You have the absolute frontier with Fable, and you give it your most difficult problems, and you pay that $50 per million output tokens, and you say, thank you, sir. And then for everything else, you don't need it. You can go back to Sonnet. You can go back to Haiku. I really encourage you to think about what task you're assigning to which model. The more you know about that, the more prepared you're going to be for the coming years. We're already seeing companies balk at these crazy bills that they're receiving from Anthropic and OpenAI. So if you know how to route the task properly, you're going to be in a good position. It is less than half the price of Claude Mythos Preview. Very interesting. Fable 5 and Mythos 5 can work autonomously for longer than any previous Claude models. Below, we discuss how these skills apply to software engineering and cover the model's improved capabilities in knowledge work, vision, memory, and life sciences research. This is what I noticed most of all. The model was so capable of doing tasks for long periods of time. And as I mentioned, there really wasn't a task that I gave it that it turned around and just gave me a quick answer or turned around in like 2 minutes and gave me something. It never did that. It was, 5+ minutes minimum. During early testing, Stripe reported that Fable 5 compressed months of engineering into days. In a 50 million line Ruby code base, shout out Ruby, the model performed a code base wide migration in a day that would otherwise have taken a whole team over 2 months by hand. And this is really it, right? Like if this is the type of task you're looking to complete, $50 per million output tokens is a bargain because otherwise you're going to be paying a ton of engineers. Stripe salaries to work on it for 2 months. And now that same team can oversee its progress and work on other things in parallel. Here's something else that I'm going to talk about. Fable 5 is also more token efficient than past Claude models. This is very interesting. Now, let me share my experience. The information density coming out of Fable was unlike anything I've ever seen. And so it might be more token efficient from an algorithmic standpoint, but just simply from the output explanations of what it was accomplishing for me, the information density was hard to read at times, if I'm being honest. Like, it was using extremely complex words, extremely complex descriptions. It was very verbose, but not only verbose, it was information dense. And so when you have information density, it is effectively increasing the intelligence of the model, because then with those fewer words, you can do more. Thus, you can throw more compute at the inference. It can run for the same amount of time and get more out of that same compute time than it would for Opus 4.8. So that is really interesting. And it actually leads me to think about something else. This is kind of, I think, way in the future, and maybe we won't allow it at all, but information density seems like something we're not really talking about all that much. How much information can you get out of every word conveyed by the model? Now, imagine there was a way to increase information density even further. Now, for me, reading the output of Fable, I actually found it very difficult. I had to slow down my reading pace. I had to really think about every word that it was telling me, but another model doesn't have to do that. And so there's this argument that Fable or future AI models might actually develop their own language, a hyper information dense language that only it can read. Now, obviously, there are some big problems with that, some big risks. If we can't read it, then we have no idea what they're talking about. We have no idea what they're planning, what their intentions are. And so that becomes extremely risky. But there is this argument that we would actually have a much higher efficiency and be able to get so much more out of the models if they simply communicated in maybe a non-alphanumeric language, symbols maybe, I don't know. It's so interesting to think about though. And I only started thinking about this because of the information density out of the models. So on Cognition's frontier code evaluation, which tests whether models can pass difficult coding tasks while meeting the standards of high quality production code bases, Fable 5 scores highest among frontier models, even at medium effort. I tried 2 different effort levels. Most of all, I used the extra effort level, and it was just overkill. It was slow, and it felt like it was way too powerful. It felt like I can dial down the effort on the model to the lowest possible thing, and it might even still be too high of effort for what I needed. It's crazy to think about. Then Ultra Code. So Ultra Code, if you're not familiar, is their new workflows feature. It basically kicks off a planning agent, which delegates out to potentially hundreds of sub-agents in parallel. And I saw this live, and it is crazy to watch live. You see it start to think maybe a few minutes of just planning. And then it would literally, I gave it a task of review my entire code base, give me a report. And it would almost spin up an individual sub-agent for every single file I had in my entire code base. And I would see all 100 plus of them running in parallel. And just obviously watching my token budget just explode, but fascinating to watch. And it feels like Fable is really good at utilizing the workflows feature, parallel delegation of agents. And so I encourage you, as you're using this model, as you're using Fable, start on the lowest possible thinking effort setting. And most likely it's going to be sufficient for your use cases. Here's frontier code, mean cost per task, log scale. This is the score. Here we go. Yeah. So one thing is interesting. I think it was, who was it yesterday who had that great blog post? Noam Brown from OpenAI, maybe. So Noam Brown, who's a researcher at OpenAI, talked about this yesterday. He wrote this fantastic blog post about there really doesn't seem to be a limit in thinking tokens to quality relationship. Meaning you can continue to throw tokens at a problem and it will continue to improve the output. There doesn't really seem to be a limit, or at least we have not found it yet. And so what you're seeing here is even when you kind of come up on the 100 million tokens, the models are still improving. There just doesn't, it just continue to throw tokens at these problems. And it seems like the compute demand might actually be higher than we even anticipated, which was already high to begin with. Mythos Fable really emphasizes this point where there doesn't seem to be a limit in the number of tokens you can throw at a problem. Fable in particular seems incredibly willing and eager to use all of those tokens. So really like dial down the effort and only dial it up when you need it. For sure. Here's a video. Claude Fable 5 beats Pokemon Fire Red only using vision. Wow. Full speed on this one. No maps, no navigation aids, or extra game state information. Earlier, Claude models needed a complex helper harness to play Pokemon. Claude Fable 5 completed the game with vision alone. Very, very cool. Here is a simulation of the solar system and predicting solar eclipses. This doesn't seem all that crazy. We've seen stuff like this. Here's the problem with showing off demos of the model. All the models today, Opus 4.8, GPT 5.5, they're very capable of building exactly this. That's actually one of the reasons I stopped doing model tests in my videos, because I couldn't even come up with tests that were difficult enough for it, which is kind of wild to think about. There was no test that I could come up with where I was like, wow, this is a standout model because it was able to achieve this thing. The last time that happened, and really one of the last model tests I ever ran, was for Gemini 2.5 Pro, where it was able to simulate a Rubik's Cube and actually scramble it and solve it correctly. That was really the last time where I was blown away by something a model was able to do that previous versions were not. Now it's all about the vibe of the model. You have to actually get in and really start using it and see where those kind of edges are. And I haven't found any with Fable 5 yet. Mythos 5, our internal protein design experts accelerated aspects of the drug design process by around 10 times. Very interesting. One other thing I want to talk about that's super interesting is their release and fear-based marketing, right? So it's like a few months ago that we heard about Mythos for the first time. And then we just got reports that Anthropic has been testing Mythos since January. And even though we knew about it publicly when Mythos was announced, nobody had it. And it wasn't until now, June 9th, 2026, that we actually had access to the model. I think this was very intentional. I think Anthropic wanted to keep the model to build their next model. That is the reason. They want to accelerate their own development. They want to accelerate their own research to the point where they feel comfortable that they have a sufficient lead and then they can release the model to everybody else. And they have a history of this. If you remember, they cut off xAI's access to the Claude family of models because they didn't want their competitors building using their own models, using their own technology. So they have a long history of this. So something to keep in mind. So when they're talking about the safety of the model, we've previously identified large-scale attempts, and they link the article in which they talk about it, and we covered it in a video on this channel, to extract Claude's capabilities to train competing models in authoritarian countries. Distillation of Fable 5's abilities could indirectly lead to the proliferation of near-frontier AI capabilities. We already have near-frontier. Now that I've seen Fable, I think open source is more than 6 months behind. I think it's probably closer to a year behind. And these could be released without the appropriate safeguards. Requests that are flagged by our classifiers as being part of such distillation attempts will fall back to Opus 4.8. Whoa! They're like, oh, you want to distill? Go ahead. You can have our own model. Opus 4.8. That's so funny. A new data retention policy, changing the way that we handle business customer data for Fable 5, Mythos 5, and future models with similar or higher capability levels. We will require 30-day retention for all traffic on Mythos class models on both first and third-party services. We won't use this data to train new Claude models or for any non-safety related purpose. We've instituted new privacy protections, including logging all human access to the data and ensuring installation after 30 days in almost all cases. And why do they do that? No, they are not using it to train. Although if you're a direct customer, not a business customer, maybe they are. But this data will help us defend against complex and novel attacks, including new jailbreaks, Pliny, I'm sure you're gonna love this, and attacks that operate across many requests, as well as help us identify and reduce false positives. Fable 5 is available everywhere today. So if you wanna try it, you can try it right now. Pricing for both models, $10 per million input, 50 per million output. Developers can use Fable 5 in the Claude API. We expect demand for Fable 5 to be very high. Now, here's the thing. As I was using it, it did feel very slow, and I wonder if that's a function of just the size of the model, also how many tokens it kind of was eager to use, how thorough it wanted to be. These are all part of what makes it feel slow. Now, I want to go over, I wrote a little review on Twitter. So I talked about the model being really good. Let's just get that out of the way. It is incredibly good. One of my favorite prompts to give a new model that I'm testing is review the entire code base. And it reviews it for security. It reviews it for documentation, logical gaps, edge cases, UX, UI, workflows, test coverage, everything. And it found things that no other model saw. And I will say this, it actually said that my code was in a really good place already. So it found things. It didn't find a ton of things, but it did find things. And all of it has been built with either Opus 4.8 or GPT 5.5. So keep that in mind. But I know all of you know that the model is good, or at least like I've said it enough times. Let's talk about the quirks. It is incredibly verbose. I already talked about this. Explanations get super deep, super technical very quickly. And I had to update my Claude MD file multiple times to try to encourage it to simplify its explanation to me. I would often, more often than not, have to tell it, please simplify the explanation. I felt dumb reading Fable telling me what it just did. I felt dumb. It was not a good feeling, right? This is the first time where I was like, God, can it just explain it like I'm 5? And I've never really had to say that to another model. And I talked about the information density already. I talked about the fact that there's an argument because of how well information density works to increase efficiency of a model. Maybe agents will develop, AI will develop their own hyperdense language. Here's another really odd thing. It wanted to ask clarifying questions so very badly. It was so annoying. And like, yeah, I'm okay with a couple questions for complex tasks, but no matter how difficult the task, it was asking me to clarify questions. So here was the flow. A single prompt would turn into, it would ask me, let's say 3 to 5 clarifying questions, sometimes more. Then it would summarize my answers and ask me to confirm the summary. Here's what you said. Is that what you just said? Okay, great. Then it would say, I'm gonna write a spec. Is that okay with you? Yes, just write the spec. Okay, here's the spec. Is the spec correct? Please read it. Yes, the spec is correct. Keep going, go. Okay, then it would ask me to confirm its agentic approach. Should I spin off a bunch of agents in parallel or should I do it sequentially? I don't know, you decide. Why are you asking me these things? Just go build. And I got so frustrated. And then finally, after all of those questions and confirmations, finally it would go build it for me. And when it finally did, it was great. But that was very frustrating to watch. And then yeah, finally, it just felt very slow. I've already talked about this. It was slow to start. I would watch, so in Claude Code Desktop, there's 2 things that it shows you really. It gives you a timer on how long the task is taking, and then it tells you how many tokens it has used. And often what would happen, especially within the first 5 minutes, it would go to like 1,500 tokens. That's 1500, 1,500. And the timer would just tick up. And I'd be like, is it doing anything? I couldn't figure it out. I don't know what it was actually accomplishing during those first like 5 to 8 minutes. And this would happen on every single prompt. I would just sit there kind of scratching my chin thinking, is it going? Like I wanted to poke it. And then like in a blink of an eye, especially in workflows mode, it would go from like 1,500 tokens to 1.5 million within 30 seconds. It was crazy to watch. One last little thing. I promise I'm going to get to the testing after this. I want to talk about loops. I just made a video on loops. If you don't know what a loop is, it is the thing that Peter Steinberger, it is the thing that Boris Cherny has been talking about, the next abstraction layer above agentic engineering. It's much simpler once you understand the concept. But when I think about loops, workflows, and Fable together, it really feels like nobody understands what's coming. I can't stress that enough. When you have the ability for the model which is already incredibly autonomous, and then you also parallelize it with workflows, and then you wrap it in a loop in which it will just continue to burn tokens trying to build whatever it is you set it to build until it reaches some goal. I just can't imagine how powerful that is. The idea of building software factories is very much here, and only a fraction of everybody doing agentic engineering is even scratching the surface of what's possible. I think not even Anthropic and OpenAI are fully utilizing what is there. The model overhang, the concept of the models being so good and we don't even know how to get the most out of them is so very real. And it became much more visceral to me after using Fable. And so I ran a few tests with Fable. Let me show those to you. First, here's the Rubik's Cube simulation, which it absolutely crushed. Builds an interactive, playable 3D Rubik's Cube that runs in the browser. I should be able to scramble it, turn the faces and solve it, make reasonable choices on the rest. Don't ask me any questions. That is the most realistic looking Rubik's Cube that I've seen. Okay, I can grab a side and I can rotate it. Very cool. Let's do scramble. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. So the scramble worked. Now solve. There it is. That is a stunning success. I mean, look at the light, the reflection, the shadows. Really nice. Really, really nice. And next, in maybe one of the most impressive demos I've ever seen, here is a fluid dynamics simulation that ran flawlessly. Build an interactive real-time fluid simulation that runs in the browser. I should be able to push the fluid around with my mouse and watch it react. Choose the method and controls. Add lots of settings dials to it. Don't ask me any questions. 63 different agents running in parallel. Look at that. Look at all these tools. So they ran each for, let's say, 2 minutes on average by the look of it. They burned between 20 and 30,000 tokens each. Oh, that's so sick. Here, sim resolution, extreme.
I did mining.
Wow, look at that. So cool. My God. Die resolution maximum. Yeah, man, this is by far the best fluid dynamic simulation I've ever created using a model. Wow. Let's say time scale. Very cool. Velocity fade. Okay, it fades much more quickly. Let's say, boom. Die fade, swirl, vortex. Let's turn it up. Yeah, look at that. Splat radius, let's turn that up. Yeah, there we go. All right, this is definitely a winner. Very nicely done. And once again, thank you to Here.now for sponsoring this video. I'm gonna drop all of the tests that I ran, published to Here.now down below in a pinned comment. You can also check out Here.now directly in the description. So clearly Fable is incredible. But what really unlocks it is using it with workflows and using it with loops. And if you don't know what loops are, I made an entire video right here explaining it.